Well, Ben, I have to admit that last week when Frank Mir showed up to fight Fedor Emelianenko, looking about as good physically as we have seen him in some time to be in fighting shape, especially considering the 304 pounds we saw him at just several weeks ago at the initial press conference for this event when he did the first face-off with Fedor Emelianenko. That's when I started to think, I wonder if we're actually going to have like a credible heavyweight fight here in the main event of Bellator 198. However, and I believe that we talked about this a little bit last week, even though these heavyweight fights are hard to call just because they can be a bit of a coin flip, I did think, honestly, that this was probably Frank Mir's fight to lose. And so seeing him show up at 260 fairly ready pounds certainly did not dispel me of that notion right up to the point that he and Fedor Emelianenko got in the cage. Were you surprised at how fun this fight was and essentially at the reaction of it? It seemed to go over like gangbusters for everybody that watched it.
Well, yeah, because it lets you relive a little Fedor magic. He goes out there looking light on his feet, throwing those murder balls. Honestly, you know what I was really surprised at? Watching this fight and then afterwards writing something and going back to look up the time, when I realized it was only 48 seconds, I was like, whoa, really? Because I felt like we had at least 2 minutes.
Yeah, it felt like we did a whole lot of living, as I tweeted,
yeah,
during those 48 seconds.
Up and down. It looked like Fedor might have been hurt there early on.
Yeah, I think he got clipped behind the ear basically with the first combination that Frank Mir threw.
Yeah, and
at that point, it seemed like another Fedor fight where we were going to be like, oh, this guy, like, he just can't get hit anymore.
Yeah, but then he pulls off that sweet-ass throw, just getting Frank Mir all up in the air. And then, that sweet little short uppercut as Frank Mir's getting in close there to drop him and then puts him away. I mean, it was exactly the kind of fight you needed there because you didn't want to see this one in the third round. You don't want to see that. 48 seconds is a good, pace to where two old guys like that, they can do a sprint for 48 seconds. There's not going to be a whole lot left in minute 2. But they can really give you a whole hell of a lot of action if that's all they have to do it for. And so it allowed you to kind of relive what those old Fedor fights used to be, especially, remember Fedor versus, Andrei Arlovsky in Affliction, where it's like, oh, okay, he's getting beat up a little bit. Then he lands that one big punch, changes everything. It made you at least able to kid yourself that you're seeing that old Fedor again. However, let's not get too carried away here. You were able to do it over there against Frank Mir. It doesn't mean you found the fountain of youth, though, if you're Fedor.
No, obviously not. But doesn't it make you feel like, man, shit must be so weird if you are a heavyweight? Like, I interviewed Frank Mir last week about this fight, and he told me, even though he still felt a little rusty because he hadn't fought in 2 years owing to his positive PEDs test coming out of his first-round knockout loss to Mark Hunt, he told me he had been in camp for 4 months for this fight, basically gave himself 4 months to get ready. And he was also doing the awesome Frank Mir thing where he was saying he would be better against Chael. He was basically talking about the Chael Sonnen fight as if it was a done deal. That was the fight that was happening. But don't you think it must just be the weirdest feeling in the world to, as far as Frank Mir was concerned, spend 4 months in camp and then the fight lasts 48 seconds?
Yeah.
What the hell, man? I guess you got to be ready to go 15 minutes, but at the same time, that would, especially if you lost, I feel like it would be hard to reconcile that in your mind.
Right, but at this point, I mean, at his age, with his experience, I guess by now either you made your peace with that's how those things can go, or you haven't. I remember talking to, I think it was Sean Jordan once. Remember Sean Jordan?
Yeah.
Heavyweight.
Yes.
He was comparing it once to how going into one of these fights, especially these heavyweight fights, he's like, for the first few seconds, maybe the first 30 seconds or so, you feel like you still have your hand on the controls, like in the video game. But then everything is moving fast, you're just reacting, and just going, and there's no time to think. And after that point, you don't really feel like you're in control anymore. And so it almost feels like you're kind of browning out and then kind of coming to and being like, okay, so how did it go? And it struck me as a really, a relatable way of describing that, where you can kind of picture okay, yeah, you get swept up in the moment. You're just kind of in the middle of the roiling storm of the fight. And then you're hoping for the best. You're hoping that you've programmed your body well enough and that the brakes go your way.
Well, especially when you consider the punch that Fedor used to knock Frank Mir out. Like, and I guess maybe the lesson of this, one that we already know, that like the last thing to go is the punching power. Clearly, Fedor still hits hard as hell, because the punch that he knocks Frank Mir out with is kind of like a clipped uppercut, like an awkwardly placed uppercut after Frank Mir. It's like a counter uppercut after Frank Mir misses a punch that, like, if a normal person threw it, doesn't seem like it would be that hard. But like, because a heavyweight professional MMA fighter whose name is Fedor Emelianenko threw it, it separated Frank Mir from his senses enough to get that stoppage.
Well, also, he seemed like Frank Mir was kind of lunging forward a little bit at the time and maybe didn't quite totally see that one, and that can really hurt you. But yeah, I mean, Fedor goes out there, wins that fight. You're reminded, okay, so he can still do this thing. Like, remember the criticism we would say every once in a while was that Fedor fights like it's still 2005, and like he's still the same guy he was in 2005, like he could still take a punch the same way, and that the competition was still the same, that it was used to saying that, hey, if you were a heavyweight who could move and also had power, and had a well-rounded game like he did, then you were already, 75% of the way to greatness. And the sport has changed, he has physically changed, but yet in this kind of fight, it plays exactly to his strengths still.
Right.
Now, though...
Again, because it's only 48 seconds long.
That's right.
Who knows? Go out there and fight like it's whatever decade, and so long as you win, all to the good.
And then you see him standing there with your boy Chael Sonnen afterwards. And Chael's going to show up, and he's going to do just the... looking at the pro wrestling playbook, like, let's see, where are we? Chicago. Okay, go out there, talk about how you hate being in Chicago. Let's get that one, right off the bat. And then talk some shit about Fedor, even though it seems like you've just flipped a switch to decide to be that way. We saw you on the broadcast earlier tonight, and you were not that way at all. Meanwhile, Fedor just completely ignores him the entire time. Just smoking and joking with Scott Coker, let Chael Sonnen do his thing. Yeah. Are you excited about this one now?
It's hard for me to comprehend that it's going to happen, just because it seems like such a bizarre matchup to have natural middleweight Chael Sonnen go out there and fight somewhat old heavyweight Fedor Emelianenko as part of this, like, essentially Bellator open weight Grand Prix. I think we can say, since like there is an upper limit, but at the same time, most of the dudes in this draw are not natural heavyweights. Do you think that it's a toss-up? Do you think either guy could win this fight? Like, maybe I'm just riding the wave off this Fedor victory. And like Bellator, frankly, did a really good job isolating some slow motion highlights that made Fedor look really good in this fight, especially the one where like he lands a punch and then does that like step back thing just in time to make Frank Mir miss his counterpunch. But like, do you think Chael Sonnen can beat Fedor? Do you think it's a toss-up? I saw it floated around on social media that like this is another sort of a coin flip.
I think the only way Chael Sonnen beats Fedor is by decision. I don't see how Chael Sonnen poses a real threat to finish Fedor. Do you? I mean, it's not like you're going to stand there and you're going to... I mean, even Fedor, even if he can't take a punch as well as he used to, it's not like Chael Sonnen's out there knocking a whole lot of people out on the feet. And especially not guys who are used to dealing with real heavyweights hitting them.
Right.
It's hard for me to imagine him hurting him at all in the striking game. Maybe you can take Fedor down over and over again and stay on the top position and somehow not get submitted, although we've seen in the past that's a little bit of a problem for Chael Sonnen. He can be winning a fight and hanging out right where he wants to be in top position and still get submitted. Fedor has a pretty good submissions game, even on his back. To me, if you're Chael Sonnen, you have to think to yourself, I got to get this guy tired. I got to survive like the time when he's really dangerous in the first few minutes in the first round, and then I just got to wear him out and beat him that way.
Yeah. That sounds like the proper game plan, but man, I have a hard time believing he can do that against Fedor. Like, do you think he can take Fedor down? And like, again and again? Like, Chael Sonnen had arguably the best peer takedowns in his weight class in all of MMA. He is one of the few dudes in his prime that could go out there and shoot a double on you without setting it up, without throwing any punches, and he would take you down. But can he do that to 240-pound, Sambo master of sport, Fedor Emelianenko?
Maybe. The problem is you're going to have to do it all night long. You're not going to go down there, so get him on the ground and submit him or something if you're Chael Sonnen. It's hard for me to see that happening. So it's really hard. I guess the answer I have is I'm capable of imagining Fedor lose almost any fight at this point. Just because, time has caught up with him. A lot of the miles have caught up with him. So you put him up there against anybody that's in this tournament, I could picture him having a bad enough night to lose to anybody. However, if I had to pick somebody in this one, Fedor has all the advantages of how, he might actually win the fight. Who's more dangerous in this fight? It's got to be Fedor, But then again, you saw Chael talking about it beforehand. He was saying, well, Fedor would be better for me. Frank Mir presents a problem for me. And I think that was actually an astute analysis. I think if you're Chael Sonnen, even if you do have to deal with the problems Fedor presents, a part of you is still going, whew, dodged a bullet there, not having to deal with Frank Mir's big ass.
Maybe so. All right, let's do Are You Fucking Kidding Me, Ben? And then we will move on to round number 2. I'm going to do my Are You Fucking Kidding Me since it's Fedor Emelianenko related. Ben, here is a headline that you don't see often in our sport. Fedor Emelianenko questioned by FBI at Chicago hotel ahead of Bellator 198 victory. Are you fucking kidding me? So the FBI is out here interviewing Fedor about his connections to the President of the United States and the President of Russia, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, respectively. Again, are you fucking kidding me? And Ben, how weird but also typically MMA would it be if we somehow discovered that Fedor Emelianenko was in the middle of a plot to fix the presidential election?
Is Fedor Emelianenko a Russian spy? Can you sit here and say conclusively that he is not a spy?
We can't say anything about this dude conclusively. Like, if you told me that Fedor Emelianenko carried a cigarette lighter through customs that had a message inside it for someone, I couldn't tell you that was false. I couldn't tell you that was totally ridiculous.
Well, I think you're downplaying his capabilities a little bit. You think he's nothing more than a mule. Maybe this kind of soft-spoken demeanor where he acts like he doesn't understand anything and he acts like, he doesn't have anything to say. Maybe that's all a ruse. Maybe he's actually running the show here.
Well, maybe. You think he's the puppet master? He's pulling the strings?
Maybe.
Like Fedor is at home in Stario School, secretly running the shadow government of the world?
You know what I feel weird for admitting is that while I do think there is a legitimate concern about Russian interference in U.S. elections and a threat posed by the Russian government, I still think it would be somehow super fucking awesome if it turns out that Fedor is a spy.
There you go. You fucking kidding me?
Kidding me? Jed, my Are You Fucking Kidding Me kind of goes out to a couple people here. I'm sure by now you've seen this TMZ video of the TMZ cameraman catching up with Dana White, asking him questions about what are you actually going to do to Conor McGregor? Are you going to punish him at all? First of all, I got to give an Are You Fucking Kidding Me to the TMZ cameraman because after he asked about Conor McGregor, and then, hey, maybe you'll have him and Nurmi in Russia, Dana White shoots that down. And then he asks, what about doing an event in North Korea? Now that the situation is changing there. Dana White tries to roll with him a little bit on this. Tries to just be like, well, South Korea is a big market for us. We're super excited about that. They just built a big new arena. It's going to be awesome. And then the guy, though, continues to pursue this. Says, but what about North Korea?
Dogged journalist. TMZ camera guy. He's not going to be shaking off this bone, Ben. He's got his jaws on this bone. He's not going to be shaken off.
Are you fucking kidding me? We're talking about, you think UFC Pyongyang is really on anybody's radar? You think that's what they're really thinking about right now? Like, oh God, please let these frosty world relationships thaw so that we can get a UFC fight night event out here. All we need is that and also food and medicine.
Live and free on Fox Sports 1.
But also, and Are You Fucking Kidding Me about, do you remember back when this Conor McGregor thing first happened, and Dana White called it the most despicable thing in the history of the UFC? So he was disgusted, said he wasn't sure he wanted to be in business anymore with Conor McGregor. Now, the cameraman asked him, are you going to punish Conor McGregor? The answer is, we'll see. We'll see what happens. He's got to be punished by the law first, but let's see what happens in New York. Now, TMZ took that and made the headline, Dana White says the UFC will punish Conor McGregor after his court case is settled or whatever. That's not what he said. He said, after he gets done with that, then we'll see. And you know what you will see means in this context from this fight promoter, don't you?
Sigh. Does it mean they'll do fucking nothing?
They'll do fucking nothing, Chad. You fucking kidding me?
Fucking kidding me? That's going to do it for round number 1. We'll be right back with round number 2.